Hey everybody. I don't really have a subject in mind as I'm sitting down to record this episode, so I apologize in advance if it isn't very good. These ones where I improvise usually aren't. They're usually my worst ones. I just cringe when I listen to that existential ramblings episode. It's so bad. That was the first episode I did after like a month and a half break, and I had to get back into podcasting, and I just wasn't motivated to do it. And also, it was the first time that I had drank in like a month and a half. And let's just say I got a little tipsy. And after I was done, I thought, boy, that was really a bad episode. I probably shouldn't publish it. But then I thought, nah, I think it's probably good to remind myself what I sound like after I've had too much alcohol. I've talked about that before on this podcast. One thing that podcasting has taught me is that I used to think that alcohol made me more fun, or to be around people. And I'm realizing, oh no, I just sound like an idiot. I mean, a little bit of alcohol is good. A lot's bad. When I used to go to parties, I would just like, see how much I can drink. I'll be more fun that way. No, I don't think I was. I think I was just an idiot. Maybe I was more fun, but I probably wasn't more likable. Nowadays, when I go to a party, I think, let's see how little I can drink. I remember listening to that Joe Rogan episode with the girl from Parma. What's her name? Let me look it up. Suzanne Santo is her name. If anybody's listening to this from Cleveland, apparently her parents own a shop there in Parma Heights, right by Pearl Road and 71. There's a pizza shop or Italian restaurant there called Santo's. Apparently that's Suzanne Santos from Honey Honey, and from the Joe Rogan podcast, that's her family's restaurant. But anyways, her and Joe Rogan got so trashed on one of their episodes. I think they were drunk and high and also doing mushrooms. And I just have to imagine doing that in front of millions of people and then waking up the next day and hearing the podcast episode, if you have to, is just probably humiliating. It was embarrassing enough for me myself to do that existential ramblings episode and have to cringe when I listen to it again. It wasn't too bad at the beginning. It was towards the end when I was starting to get really, really tipsy. But anyways, I went back to Cleveland recently. I saw snow for the first time in a year. I really didn't think I'd do well in the cold, but honestly, it didn't bother me. It's like, oh yeah, I've been through this before. I know how this works. Just put some thermal underwear on and a warm coat, and you'll be fine. My friend and I went for a hike in North Chagrin Reservation to Squires Castle and back, and it was pretty nice. I mean, I guess snow is a novelty at this point for me. I stayed overnight at a farmhouse. That was the one morning when the cold really got to me. Corn's all down, and there's nothing really to protect you from the wind. It's very flat in parts of Ohio. Not in Cleveland, but where I was at the time, it's very flat there. One thing that I did notice from my time there is that Ohio just seems to be very hard on people, especially Cleveland. Life has changed so much since COVID in the cities. Culture has changed. The way people think has changed. I mean, I noticed these things when I lived in Ohio for however many years, like most of my life. I remember last November, right before I left Ohio, which is pretty early in the season, looking at myself in the mirror and saying, "Ah, so pale." Which, if you don't get that reference, which a lot of people I talk to don't, just Google it. It's a YouTube video. It doesn't take very long to watch. It's pretty hilarious. Even though I left Ohio, and I'll probably go back there one day in the not too far future, I really like Ohio. I mean, I don't have hard feelings towards it. I just wanted to travel around and experience some things and have some adventure. I wish I had done it when I was younger. My sister babysits some kids, and they're so fun. So before I left that area, I played Legos for a couple of hours. I had a spare day. Actually, I had kind of like a day and a half to get back to Florida before I had to go back to work. And I was torn. Should I try to get back there quickly, or should I just try to enjoy my time? But on my way down, I stopped in to see a friend, and I told him in advance I've only got like an hour or two to talk. But I knew better. This isn't the kind of friend that you just hang out with for an hour or two. But I wanted to see some new things, It's like, what's more important to me, time or adventure or experiencing new things? And on this specific trip, since I had extra time, I decided, you know what? I'm going to do something different. But because I had stayed at my sister's house playing Legos until noon, and because I had spent 4 hours with my friend who I swore I was only going to stay there for an hour or two, I got a really late start. So I found myself driving through rural Kentucky late at night. And I thought Google was taking me down highways, but I got out there and it was just like these 2-lane roads in the pitch darkness. And at one point I thought, I'm so far out in the middle of nowhere, gas stations are going to close, so I better keep my fuel tank on full, So I'd stop every once in a while and just keep filling up just in case. A big yellow moon eventually came up over the horizon and started to light up the landscape, and I could see the mountains. One of my philosophies has always been travel north in the summer and travel south in the wintertime. But I ran into a real issue with traveling in the darkest time of year. I mean, it's January right now, less than a month away from winter solstice when it's at its darkest. And it occurred to me that the problem with traveling in the wintertime is that as you're driving, you don't get to see much because it's so dark. So it's like you're missing half the experience. Like the entire point of traveling is to see things, to see environments, to see the landscape of the places you're traveling through. So I basically went 2.5 hours out of my way to just see mountains in the dark. And at one point, as I was driving down those 2-lane roads, those 2-lane highways, and as I was winding back and forth through these rural mountains, I thought several times, what am I doing? This is the trouble that I get myself into when I travel. I like adventure too much. Sometimes I can't believe I'm still alive, all the crazy crap I've done. But as I was driving, it started getting later and later, and I stopped to see if I could find a hotel, and it wasn't a very nice hotel. And I asked about prices, and they told me it was more than it was going to be if I ordered it through Expedia or whatever. And I'm like, well, what can I get this price? And they're like, no, you can place the order, but it's going to take 45 minutes for it to go through. And then we can get you in a room. And I'm like, nah, I'm not going to wait on that. So I just kept going and going. And at some point I started to realize, and I've got myself into the same kind of trouble in the past, that it's like, oh, it's kind of late to get a hotel. I mean, it's like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. at this point. And I just kept driving and driving. And part of me just wanted to keep going, but my ETA for Florida was like 9 a.m. And I'm like, I don't think that's safe. On my way up, I went through Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio. And on my way back, I went through Ohio, Kentucky, maybe Virginia, Tennessee. I'm not sure which order that goes in. And then South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. So I got a lot of states in over 1 week. That's a lot of states to visit. I can't stand flying. I remember getting onto an airplane one time and looking at the pilot who, they wait there as you're entering the plane, like greeting you and stuff. I remember looking at him and thinking, this is who's flying this plane? I don't feel very good about this. People have criticized me in the past and said, you have to be in control. And I thought about that criticism, and I think it's pretty accurate. I don't want someone else in charge of my well-being. I've been on some horrible plane flights where the turbulence just rocked us, and I can't stand it when it's that bad. I think it might be different if I was in charge. I'm the same way when I'm in a car. If somebody's driving poorly and I'm in the passenger seat, I just feel helpless, especially if they're not very good drivers. But to play my own devil's advocate, I've actually been in charge of plane flights before, and I almost died. And I'm not joking. Seriously, I almost died twice. I'm not a very good pilot. But anyways, I'm getting distracted again. This is how it goes when I don't script my episodes. I'm very flighty and easily distracted and have to remember where I was. So anyways, I was driving through North Carolina at like 2 a.m. and I had to make a decision. Okay, I'm either going to try to make it to Florida or I can stay in the mountains and go hiking. I really enjoy hiking, and I wanted to get one in while I was somewhere where there was some elevation change. And I think pretty much everything from that point forward would be flat. So when I got to the North Carolina border, I just stopped at a rest stop, and I looked it up, and I'm like, how long am I allowed to stay at a rest stop before somebody says something? Are you allowed to sleep overnight at a rest stop in your car? So I looked it up, And apparently in North Carolina, and I don't even know if this website was accurate or not, you're allowed to rest at a rest stop for 4 hours. So it was 2 a.m. And if I slept for 3.5 hours, it would be 5:30 or 6 when I woke up. And so that's what I chose to do. I just slept for 3.5 hours and I set my alarm. And this is bizarre. I don't know how this works, but I woke up just like a few minutes before my alarm went off. And that happens a lot. I don't know how your inner clock knows that kind of stuff, but my inner clock knew it's time to wake up. Your alarm's going to go off in a few minutes. So I woke up at like 6 a.m. And I was like, I want to go to a mountain. And I want to watch the sunrise from the mountain. So I found one on All Trails, which I don't necessarily trust, but I didn't have a lot of time to think about it. So I just picked one of the better rated ones, and I thought it was going to be a really great one. And I just drove there. It was about a half hour out of the way, but no big deal. I want to go hiking, right? And I arrived before sunrise, which I was surprised by. I think I was there about 7 a.m. and I was surprised it was still dark. And this trail I went to was called Lookin Rock, and it was in North Carolina. So I got my headlamp out and I just started climbing up the mountain, hiking up the mountain as fast as I could. I wanted to get to the top by sunrise. So I just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And I live in Florida, and there's no elevation change whatsoever in Florida. And I'd stop every once in a while to take a photo or to get a drink of water, and I just feel my heart beating. I could just hear it. How often do you actually hear your heart? It's like scary. I'm like, oh boy. I better slow down here. It's been 9 months since I've seen an elevation change. There are no hills whatsoever in Florida. I actually did some hiking while I was up there in Ohio and in Columbus, and then another one in Cleveland. And there's some slight elevation changes there, but nothing like a mountain. But I just kept wanting to push it. I was trying to choose between, should I keep pushing it or should I look out for my health and not have my heart explode? And at some point I just realized I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it to the top for sunrise. So I just enjoyed the view from behind the trees. And once I got to the top, honestly, I was kind of annoyed. The view actually was I don't know what direction it was, but it was not to the east where the sun was rising. So I was just kind of disappointed. And I don't think I should have been, because it was a very beautiful view. The rocks up there were very slippery. And as I looked at them, I'm like, I bet if I step out onto these rocks and I start sliding, I look down below and I'm like, if I start sliding, I don't think I'm going to live. So I avoided the slippery rocks. And later, actually just today, like a week later, or however long it's been, I looked at a photo of Lookin Rock, and absolutely, I would 100% just started sliding to my death. So I'm glad I didn't go out there. It's kind of weird. You go in certain places and there's a 10-foot ravine and there's danger, risk of death. And then you go to other places like in North Carolina, it's you're on your own, buddy. You can't figure this out. You're screwed. I went to Stone Mountain State Park in North Carolina earlier in the year and did a hike there as well. And I definitely recommend that one. The Lookin Rock, it wasn't bad, but it was a lot of work for not as much payoff. Stone Mountain, on the other hand, was not as much work, and there was a lot more payoff. But that doesn't mean it wasn't challenging. It was challenging, but it was just kind of, I don't know, more moderate and a lot of really beautiful scenic stuff. And it might have partially been because of the time of year that I was there. I was in Stone Mountain in May. So there were green trees and everything, and it was just really pretty at the time. And when I went to Lookin Rock, it was the dead of winter and all the trees were bare. One of the cool things was that you could see the shadow of the mountain that I was on the mountain next to me, which was kind of neat. I think in hindsight, I appreciate it more than I did at the time. It was just so much work to get up there. It was like one switchback after another, after another, after another. And it just seemed to never end. And then when it did, it's oh, this payoff's going to be so great. And wah, wah, wah. Actually, I think I have a sound effect for that. Oh, why aren't my sound effects working? Crap. Oh, there they are. It's more fun to say it in person. But nevertheless, it was probably the best exercise I'd gotten in quite a long time. And I get a lot of exercise. So if you ever drive by Lookin Glass Rock in North Carolina and you think, oh, should I go there? If you want a lot of exercise, yes. If you want a scenic view, maybe. But if you want slightly less exercise and more payoff, go to Stone Mountain, which honestly aren't really in the same area, so I'm not sure why I'm comparing the two. They are both in North Carolina, though. Stone Mountain was great. I loved every part of it. You've been listening to The Great Big Intergalactic. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening to the show. The Great Big Intergalactic can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, Apple iTunes, and anywhere else that podcasts can be heard. If social media is your thing, you can follow the program on Facebook or Twitter. If you enjoy the show, upvote, share, like, and subscribe. Whenever and wherever those things can be done. If you'd like to send feedback, the easiest way to do that is to email the show at tgbiuniverse@gmail.com, TGBI as in the Great Big Intergalactic, or you can leave a voicemail at 216-200-7940. Contributions could include written feedback, audio submissions, voicemails, or potentially even live guests. It was great having you today, and see you next time.